Sail home, sweet home, where the ships must go to get all cleaned up and put away.
Woo.
Hello.
Welcome, everybody.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Dakota. I beat you to it.
Happy late Q&A. We were supposed to do it last week, but I was instead doing it all solo with our topic on, what was it, transition to adulthood. You missed out on that.
I did, unfortunately. How did that go?
It went really well, but everybody saved their questions to the very end. I feel like that happens a lot where I'm just talking and rambling and people don't want to interrupt me. But then as soon as I say, all right, well, I don't have any questions, so I guess I'll go, just everybody had questions all of a sudden. It happens, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
Hopefully today, though, that's not the issue because today is Q&A day. So it's all about the questions and the answers today. So,
well, all about them. All about them. And so thank you, Dakota, for stepping in last week and doing that. Welcome, everybody. My name is Caleb. I'm an advocate here at Galt Advocacy. And like always, Mr. Dakota Hall.
Yes, I am here as well. I am here from the office. You're here from your home. And is there anything that we need to talk about before we get started with, well, I mean, obviously we need questions before we get started, but was there any upcoming events or anything, any news that we needed to tell people about?
You tell me, Dakota. What are some events that we have going on right now? Because actually, I'm not sure. I think we have one coming up at the end of this month, right?
Is the end of this month or the beginning of next? I think if you're talking about San Bernardino, I believe that's the first week of June, or
it's the first Sunday in June.
First Sunday of June, the 8th.
And on the 7th, we're at a regional center booth event.
Right. And so we actually have two events that same weekend. We have a booth event on the Saturday in San Bernardino, and then our seminar the very next day at the Doubletree in San Bernardino. That's right. So that's going to be fun. I don't know who all is going to be there. I don't know if we've solidified who all, but it's usually, Myra Galt, of course. I'm usually there. Nicole will be there. And maybe one or two other people will join us for that. So be a good time.
I'm jealous. I wish I can go, but I hope you all have a fantastic time.
I'm sure we will. Other than that, I guess we can announce that for those who watch our Spanish lives and are going to get to enjoy Nicole and Alicia later today. If you're here and you're watching this, just so you know, Alicia's going to be moving on. She's pursuing a law career, and so this is going to be your last week with us on Facebook. But we're really, we're sad to see her go, but we're celebrating her today, and we're going to be just, showing her lots of love. So if you're here and you've been watching Alicia and Nicole doing their thing, join them and just show them a lot of love today, because we're all going to be very sad we're all going to miss her a lot.
Yeah,
I agree. Thanks for doing that shout out for Miss Alicia, Dakota. It is a bummer. Always sad to see our family, our Galt family leave, but oh well. She's going to have an awesome career in law, and we're so excited for her. And thank you, everybody, for showing her some love these past, I think, year and a half, couple years. She's been helping Nicole with lives and on our Spanish page. So that's awesome. And now we do have a couple of people who are joining in now, so it's all on you guys. Please post a comment. Let us know what your questions are today. Today's Q&A. So, like always, whatever question you got, we specialize in things like IHSS and regional center, and we can talk a little bit about education today if you've got IEP questions. Yeah, so I don't see any questions just yet, so we'll give it, a couple minutes. In the meantime, Dakota and I can just ramble on about things we want to talk about. So, Dakota, how is things in your world right now with some of the families you're working with? Is there anything that's come up recently? Because I do have one thing, but did you have anything you wanted to share?
Well, let me tell you real quick about an assessment I did recently, and this was one that you are somewhat aware of. I just want to tell about one thing that happened during this reassessment, and it was really shocking to me. We were been talking for a while, and this child had, we believe this child needed protective supervision, and we had talked about some elopement issues and some mild headbanging issues, mouthing edible objects, things like that. And as we were talking about elopement, the social worker just came out and matter-of-factly said, well, he's self-directed, so he's not going to be getting protective supervision. I thought, where did that come from? Like, all we were talking about is him, leaving the house and eloping. Like, why would you say self-directed? And she started explaining something about, oh, well, because he chooses to ride his scooter instead of just wandering. That means he's got intention and purpose, and that self-directed. And so I stopped and I said, hold on, what do you mean by self-directed? Like, what's that mean? And she basically said, well, it's when you have things that you want to do. That's not right at all. I'm thinking to myself, that's not right at all. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll try asking a different way. I said, okay, for a person to get protective supervision, they have to be non-self-directing. So what's that definition for IHSS? What does it mean to be non-self-directing? And the social worker, no joke, I was on the phone, but she spoke into the phone. She said, I refuse to answer that question.
Huh?
She said to me, when I asked her, what's the definition of non-self-direction? She said, I refuse to answer that question. And I was blown. I was like, what do you mean? This is like a core pillar of your job. And moreover, we went and talked a bit about, well, because I explained to her, non-self-directing is the inability to make safe decisions due to a mental impairment.
Per the regulations. That exactly, is quote, per the regulations.
This is not my opinion or anything. And so I asked her, like, him choosing to elope, and as the social worker had pointed out, he could get hit by a car and die when he does that. Said him choosing to elope down the street on his scooter, in front of cars and everything, is that a safe and appropriate decision for him to make at 9 years old? She said, well, that's not what we're talking about. It's like,
yes, it is.
Oh, this is what she said. I asked her, is that a safe decision for him to make? And she said to me, he shouldn't have had the opportunity to make that decision in the first place. That's what she said. She said, he shouldn't have been able to make that decision. In other words, she was saying his parents should have been giving him protective supervision.
Right.
And so I was like, that's not my question. I said, is it a safe decision? And she says, well, no, it's not. And I'm like, well, you said earlier other 9-year-olds wouldn't do that, didn't you? And she said, well, I'm not comparing him to other 9-year-olds. I'm talking about him. I was like, that's part of it.
That's exactly what that's how you determine on self-direction.
Your reaction is just like my reaction. I said, that's one of the 5 questions for protective supervision is, does he need more supervision than another child the same age? And you said other 9-year-olds wouldn't elope like that. And so are you saying that he needs more supervision? She said, I'm not here to compare him to other 9-year-olds.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess you're just not here to help today is what she's really saying.
After that, I tried to talk back about that, but she was not having it after that. So that was just one experience I had with an assessment recently. And what it tells me is this. It tells me that she walked in the door already planning to deny protective supervision. Simple as that. She knew from the moment she walked in that she was going to say he is self-directed, he can't get protective supervision, no matter what we said. That's what it tells me.
I would agree. I think that is a much bigger topic than anything I wanted to bring up. I have a lot of thoughts here. And so I'm looking at the comments. I don't see any of you commenting questions yet, so we're just going to keep going. I see there is a good little group of you watching right now. So if you do have a question, please feel free to chime in. If what Dakota shared today is something maybe you've experienced at home assessment before, please let us know your experience. If you want to share the video, try and bring some more people into this stream so we can get some questions going, that'd be awesome. Thank you for doing that. Okay, Dakota, thank you for taking on that assessment for me this week and managing that social worker the way that you did. That is mind-blowing, head scratching, if you will. I almost don't have words. I wish I could say that I'm shocked, but I feel like with the amount of assessments that both of you and I have done combined, I mean, we've seen it all, right? And so to say that we're still seeing like assessments like this where social workers will kind of blatantly make themselves or put themselves in a position to where you're not in the right. Nobody's going to take a look at this, including a judge. If this does go to an appeal, nobody's going to look at you refusing to answer one of the most important questions about protective supervision and being almost hostile about it. And defensive, as if this is like a question attacking you as a social. No, your job as a social worker is to provide information and educate. And if it's a minor, somebody under the age of 18 with a disability, with a mental impairment rather, then they must be assessed for protective supervision, which means an assessment on that task. You have to elaborate on what that task is. How does it work? What are the ins and outs? Who does qualify and who doesn't qualify? And so to sit there and say, I'm just not going to give you any of the criteria for it. I'm not going to explain myself as to, or explain the definition of, again, the one thing that puts you in a position to get protective supervision is mind blowing. Because at that point, it puts you as a social worker in a position to be looked at as somebody who's now withholding information from this client. This is their benefit. It's not yours. It's their benefit that they're entitled to here in the state of California.
Yeah. And I'll just say it is not like overstating it to say that self-direction is probably the most important component of protective supervision. Like almost every aspect of it, of whether or not this person's dangerous behaviors are predictable, whether or not they are frequent enough, or that, just so much of it revolves around the question of of self-direction. So for a social worker to, for one, have a incorrect definition of self-direction and then say that they refuse to answer what non-self-direction is mind-boggling. Because this is like, if you're a social worker being trained on protective supervision, this should be like day one stuff, right?
Yeah. I completely agree. And real quick, Amanda, thank you so much for your question. Does having a conservatorship help secure protective supervision? So to quickly answer that, it is definitely a piece that can be really helpful with showing the need for protective supervision. It's not necessarily like a necessity. It's not a factor that is like one of the boxes that IHSS checks as like an automatic yes, they get protective supervision. But can it help paint a better picture of who this individual is? Absolutely, right? If somebody's conserved, then odds are they are unable to make decisions that apply to their well-being and safety and longevity, right? And that does go in line with what protective supervision is for, right? So if you do have an adult who is not conserved, there is a lot of times kind of this stigma around that, where social workers will think, well, if you never pursued the conservatorship, then they may not need a conservatorship. And if they do not need a conservatorship, they must be able to make their own decisions for themselves and their well-being. So these are all things that are not like point blank. These are like blanket statements that you can't say one's truer than the other, because not everybody who needs protective supervision has to have a conservatorship. Because we're not lawyers in that field, we would never, again, give you law advice or legal advice and tell you to get a conservatorship. However, if you do have an adult in your home, they cannot make medical decisions for themselves, financial decisions, relationship decisions. If they don't have the capacity for independent living or the ability to be economically self-sufficient, like work a full-time job, we're kind of checking all the boxes there for conservatorship to be entertained. And if everything that I just said is true, not only is the conservatorship should be entertained, but protective supervision probably should as well. So yes, a really long roundabout answer, a conservatorship can help with your pursuit to protect supervision. Is it fair to say that, Dakota, without like maybe overstating or overpromising anything?
Yeah, I would say the conservatorship itself doesn't necessarily doesn't necessarily push the county towards believing or assuming that you'll need protective supervision. However, I think even more importantly is that having the conservatorship can help avoid some of the struggles in the IHSS process in general.
Definitely.
Main problem is that, once the person reaches the age of 18, unless the county has a reason to assume that they cannot represent themselves in the assessment, in the hearing, or otherwise, then the county then will talk to the child and ask them the questions and get all the answers from them, and will exclude you from their decision making as far as the assessment goes. More importantly, when it comes to like hearings and other legal matters, and this will go back to what I talked about last week. So if you want more of an answer, you can go there. But comparing a conservator to say power of attorney, one issue with power of attorney is that the person being, giving away the powers has to sign it themselves, and it's only valid if they understand what they're signing. So if you have a child who you believe should be conserved or does need protective supervision, and if a judge were to ask you, well, do they understand legal matters? If you give them a form that says they're signing away these legal rights and everything, do they understand all the ramifications of that? You'd probably say, no, they don't even know how to keep themselves safe on a day-to-day basis. They definitely don't know this complicated legal stuff. If that's true, then any power of attorney they sign is null and void. Doesn't mean anything. Now, for IHSS, there's usually, the judges will usually allow parents to represent, but not always. So the conservatorship avoids those sort of legal struggles because a power of attorney only really works if the person signing it understands what they're doing.
I couldn't agree more. I'd say I concur with everything you said. I don't think I have anything to add on that. Yeah. Thank you, Dakota.
It's complicated.
Definitely. But you simplified it in I think a very good, great way. So thank you, Amanda, for the question. That was a great question. All right, from Ms. Bao-Li, if we request protective supervision and are denied, and something happens to your child because you have to go to work and can't stay home with them, what then? Can the social worker be held accountable? This is an interesting question.
It is. I'll just off the top say that this is more of a legal matter than an IHSS matter as far as what exactly the accountability is. But from my limited, sort of layman experience, I would say not unless you have like conclusive proof that they knowingly and intentionally gave you less time than what you needed, right? Them just being wrong isn't enough necessarily to make them like legally culpable unless they like discriminated or intentionally undercut your IHSS hours. That would be my assumption as far as how much a social work can be held to legally.
That's kind of in line with what I was going. I feel like the social worker probably doesn't have much of a much accountability there because again, their job is just to allocate the benefit, right? Their job is to determine, does this person meet the need of this program? And then you as the caregiver, you're the one that's responsible for the care of that child or that person. So God forbid something were to happen, then to kind of piggyback what Dakota said, I think the legal matters would sort of fall into you as the caregiver, parent, guardian, whoever it is. I don't see how a social worker granting protective supervision would be negatively impacted by something later on, unless they, again, wrongly granted the benefit. But I don't really see that happening. I don't know. It's a very interesting question. I guess kind of a tough one to answer, but
I think it would be different if let's, because if you do get denied protective supervision, there is a process to appeal that. There is just a regular hearing. You can request a rehearing after that. You can request a writ at a superior court. There is a process to appeal a denial. And so, if you don't first exhaust that, then to say that, well, the social worker, they're the one that chose to do this, and so they're the ones that are responsible. Like, there are other people who you could have gone to first to try and get that remedied. Now, what I will say, if let's say a judge orders that protective supervision be granted as part of a hearing, and then the county either delays for an excessively long time or straight up refuses for some reason, and then that happens, that would be a different story. And I think they would have some liability if a situation like that were to happen.
I agree. However, I do have one other point to make on that. So we did have this happen, actually. And it has happened before, I think on a couple of occasions, but I do have one family in mind that we knew, where they had an extremely fragile individual, emotionally fragile individual who was mentally ill. And she was an adult at the time. I want to say she was in her late 30s, but don't quote me on that. And this mother who was caring for this individual did appeal protective supervision a couple of times over the course of a couple of years, really fought that battle, but no judge approved it. And then that person ended up basically eloping from the home and passing away due to an accident. And so that parent or that caregiver, I can't quote or say this is exactly what happened, but to my understanding, I do believe they made an attempt to sue the county, not the social worker. So I don't know how that works, if you can really do that in that scenario. I don't know if anything came of that, but that was kind of the first time I'd ever heard that happening. And it was really heartbreaking and emotional. And I wish that family all the best. And I hope that they get, justice if there is justice, or if it gets resolved. But that's the only time I've ever heard anything like that before. Okay. We do have another question here, Mr. Dakota. Alma, can the hours change when the child turns 18?
Well, first of all, yes, absolutely. The hours can always change whenever they do a reassessment, or even just when they receive new information or new documents. Now, when it comes to turning 18 for IHSS, besides the fact that, as we were talking about before, that the social worker will start dealing with the now adult directly, unless they are conserved. Besides that, the main changes that you'll see is that domestic chores and some of the related services will now be approved if there is need in those categories, which most other ones, shopping, meal preps, laundry, most of those will come in at 17, if not earlier. But domestic housekeeping, so like household chores, cleaning up around the house and things like that, those ones, absolutely, they cannot give time until they're 18. So that's one category that will go up for sure. The other one is that protective supervision no longer has it's no longer treated as a minor case. And so they no longer ask the question of, does this person need more supervision than another minor of the same age? But realistically, by the time you turn 18, that question really is hardly a factor, because a 17-year-old who needs PS and a 17-year-old who doesn't is a very stark contrast. So they're practically an adult at that point already. So the main thing is I would say the domestic household chores changing. Other than that, I wouldn't expect much to change.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there as well. We don't,
unless they lose Medi-Cal. If the income changes and the reason they're getting Medi-Cal is because of some kind of child dependent thing, and when they turn 18 they lose Medi-Cal, that's going to have a big impact. But other than that, I wouldn't expect it. Yeah,
I would agree. We don't have much to argue about today, Dakota. I'm glad we're agreeing with everything.
We know our stuff.
Yes, absolutely. These are some great questions, like always. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and continue to share the video, like it, love it, tag a friend, tag a support group. That goes a long ways into growing these streams a little bit. Big help. And thank you, Alma, for the great question. I did actually tap into this a little bit a couple of weeks ago when I talked about how IHSS can be different for minors, adults, and elderly, the seniors. And one of the things you pointed out was obviously like the ADLs, the domestic tasks and things like that. And then the protective supervision one was, I think, a really big one, where they're no longer comparing them to a child anymore, right? Or needing, sorry, my computer died. That's okay. Dakota, do you have the laptop open to control the?
Yes, I can do our questions for us.
All right, you're taking over. Thanks.
Okay, but yeah, you can finish your thought.
Yeah, so that was pretty much it. If somebody needs 24-hour supervision as an adult, that's a big question to ask, right? Whereas for a minor, especially a young child, if that question's asked, there's usually a yes and or a no and or a no but and that's actually something that we train a lot of our clients on too, is when we're talking about the ACL 1525 and those 5 questions. One of those questions is, does this child need 24-hour, or does this person need 24-hour supervision? And a lot of times social workers or judges will say, yeah, but every child this age, 3, 4, 5, needs 24-hour supervision, right? And so thankfully, because you don't have to when they're 18, you don't really have to object to that question anymore, because an 18-year-old shouldn't be expected to need 24-hour supervision, right? But that was all that I wanted to add.
All right. And Alma said, thank you for answering her question. So thank you for asking your question. We love having them, especially on these Q&A days, or else we'd just be sitting here in silence, just staring at each other. All right.
Right.
Amanda had another question. Said, is it normal if an individual is maxed out on 283 hours and also has PS for the social worker to deduct hours from PS to move to different areas or different categories and still be maxed out on hours? So I don't know if you have anything for this, but I do. So this is normal, and it's actually a good thing. As long as what you're saying, from what I'm understanding, rather than giving you the full 195 of PS, they're lowering that down and keeping the other hours high, and you're still total across all categories getting 283. I think that's what you're saying. If that's right, this is what they do, and it is a good thing. It basically means that those extra hours are kind of, no matter what you do, you are capped at 283 hours for IHSS. The reason this is good is that PS is always going to be the same number of hours at maximum. There's no fluctuation in how many PS hours you can get. But other categories, there can be fluctuation. You can get 7 hours for meal prep, but now that you got more people living in your house, now it's down to 2.5 hours a week or something like that. Or, bowel and bladder care might go up and down, or, transportation, medical appointments. All these hours can fluctuate up and down. To have these lowered PS hours, if, let's say, you lose your bowel and bladder care, that goes away. They can then add the PS hours back in to fill in that lost time to keep you at 283. So they basically do that so that they're able to max out all of the other categories that you can get. And then if you lose any of those categories, they'll increase your PS to make up for the lost time. Anything you want to add about that?
No, however, I do think a lot of people ask a similar question, especially when they see the hours being prorated for protective supervision and kind of wondering what the heck that means, right? So down at the bottom of your notice of action, you'll notice that protective supervision, if approved, will always say 168 hours, right? And now when you hear that, you're like, wait a minute, Dakota just said that protective supervision is 195 hours per month. So what's the 168, right? Well, we've talked about this a little bit, and so protective supervision is a 24-hour benefit. So that would be 168 hours per week. And so how they do the math on that is they multiply that by 4.33, which is 4 weeks and a few days on average per month, right? So if you do 168 times 4.33, you're given 727 hours a month. And so that's basically like 24 hours in a day. If we divide that by 30, that's 24 hours. That's basically 24 hours. So that's how I've always understood that as to why they rate that. And then they prorate it and maneuver it around because they cap it at 195. I could be totally wrong, but I heard that somewhere forever ago. And that's how I've always calculated in my mind now. So yes, you will see protective supervision hours removed and prorated to fit in and help you get to the 283 if you have other hours that are maxed out to where you're at that 283 now, right? So no, nothing more to add outside of that, Dakota.
Amanda clarifies, it says PS 168, amount of service needed, 134. And so what the easiest way to look at this and figure out what it is that's happening is on the far right, where it gives you the weekly amount. It will say the maximum for PS is 45 hours and 2 minutes. And if they are lowering it to make room for other categories, it'll be less than 45 hours. That's basically it.
Gotcha.
All
that makes
right.
sense.
So next question, Tanya said, I refused to speak with the appeal specialist and she continued the case. Is that normal for them to continue on with the case even if you don't talk to the appeal specialist?
To continue the appeal?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, normal. The appeal specialist doesn't have to get anything from you in order to move on with the appeal because it's your appeal. So the appeal specialist, their job is to connect with, once you file an appeal specialist is supposed to be assigned to the appeal and then reach out to you to try and come to some type of resolution. So a lot of times they'll introduce themselves as your advocate or a mediator for the appeal. They'll say, I'm not on anyone's side. I don't work for the county, or I don't work for the social worker. I don't work for you. I'm a mediator for this. I'm here to just kind of figure it out to make sure Oh, are you muted?
Oh no, I'm just shaking my head because they say that, but they're not. They are on the county side. We know this, but
What? So to be fair,
Mhm.
they are on paper, according to the job description, not on anyone's side other than the right side, right? So their job is to do what's best in the best interest of the recipient of IHSS, right? However, they are employed by the state of California. They are employed by the county that you are applying IHSS into, right? And so what side do they typically end up on in front of a judge? Well, they're always going to be on the table where the social worker is, or the side of the table where the social worker is, right? So ultimately, their job, and this is a very informal way of saying this, their job is to do what's in the best interest of the client, unless they want to side with the social worker, regardless if it's in the best interest of the client, right? So,
and to briefly speak about like their position, they work in the same offices as these social workers. They all are basically employed by the same people. They're colleagues with each other, and in some cases, in some smaller counties, they literally are social workers who just switch back and forth between being social workers and being hearing reps, just on a case by case basis. So to what he's saying, realistically, they usually end up on the side of the county. Now, to briefly go back to your question, they are only required to reach out and try to talk to you. If you don't want to speak to them, then they've still done their job, and they can just move forward with the hearing. So yes, it is pretty normal.
that's exactly right. But Dakota, before we move on, actually,
go ahead.
Sorry, if you don't mind. So I have seen a couple of posts on some of the support groups recently where people are asking, should they even talk to their appeals rep when they reach out? And that one's, it's an interesting question because ultimately, we as advocates, when we're representing somebody, a big part of this process of the appeal is to communicate with that appeals rep, because they do have the power to overturn the social worker's decision. They have the power to make a different outcome besides the hearing itself. Because again, an appeal and a hearing those are two different things, technically, right? So the appeal is the discrepancy. That's the dispute that you're filing. You disagree with the hours, you're filing an appeal. A hearing with a judge can be one of several different outcomes of an appeal, right? And so an appeals rep's job, just so you know their power there, they can rule on the side of the social worker's denial. They can overturn the social worker's decision to deny. They can suggest something other than a hearing. They could say, hey, can we maybe try a redo assessment? Maybe you're right. Maybe the social worker missed something. Can we get another bite at the apple there and send the social worker back out to do an assessment again, with leaving your appeal rights open there, right? So there's a lot of cool stuff that can happen that the appeals rep's job technically is. But, so should you communicate with them at that point? I mean, we do, because we have to. That's a part of what we want to do. Should you? Sure. Ultimately, if you're fighting an appeal for protective supervision, we're always going to recommend you at least seek professional advice first. If some appeals reps work better than others, but just, I guess, 2 cents there. It's up to you. If you feel like you can connect with this person, if you feel like they might be able to help you rather than the social worker necessarily, then yes, you should speak with them.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of if you are going to talk to the appeals rep, have a mindset. This is not someone who is going to just listen to you and is your friend and is going to do whatever they can to help you. Treat it like a negotiation, right? With you've got a position you're trying to reach, they've got a position they're trying to reach, and you need to come to some kind of compromise and only go with it if it's beneficial for you. So that just have that sort of mindset if you're going to go down that route and if you don't have representation. All right. We got a few more questions to get to here. Amy said, hello, my daughter who has DS was recently diagnosed with autism and OCD. Our yearly assessment is next week. Will she have an increase in hours because of the new diagnosis? Thank you. Well, I'll start by saying not necessarily. Just like the diagnosis itself isn't going to cause an increase in the hours. However, if this indicates more areas of need, like if this new diagnosis shows that other areas of life are being impacted by the mental impairment and not just regular, child things, then maybe you could get time in those areas. But it's going to be more so about, if her behaviors haven't changed much since last year, then it probably won't make much of a difference to have a new diagnosis. But anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, excuse me. The only time that, like Dakota said, it might increase hours is if these diagnoses came about because they were prompted by some changes that you saw, right? So a lot of people will have the diagnosis of Down syndrome and they're dealing with a lot of the challenges that might come with it. And then kind of out of nowhere, they have a great summer, they start a new school, but then they start seeing additional behavioral challenges or combativeness during certain tasks. And they're like, they're kind of evolving into, some additional, or maybe some aggression, some challenges here that we haven't really noticed before. And then that's when maybe a doctor or a psychologist comes in and says, hey, you know what, this pattern kind of matches maybe somebody who has autism or OCD. We didn't really see it as much before, but it seems to be more prevalent now. Then yes, in those events, if, like Dakota said, if there's manifestations that come about because of the diagnosis, or the diagnosis is making it more clearer, then it could affect some of the categories. It doesn't necessarily affect protective supervision if you already have it, but it could also play a role with maybe getting protective supervision if you don't. So there's kind of some yes and no's here, I'd say, some different angles, Amy, but it's a fantastic question. And you're also not alone. This is something that happens very, very often. I'd say with Down syndrome, it's a tricky one because it's a presumptive disorder, right? So most people who have Down syndrome are going to have an intellectual disability. It's not as common to get a diagnosis of autism, but OCD, definitely. So you're definitely not alone and being maybe surprised by these new diagnoses, but we really do appreciate you sharing that. And we hope all goes well with you with your yearly assessment. If you need any help with that or have any questions about that, let us know. We'd love to help.
I think you might have some thoughts about this next one. Elizabeth asked, can you have an adult that has PS but is in a day/job day program or goes to school, college with a one-to-one assistant?
So hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for your comment. Yes. So you can have an adult. An adult. Let me I might have misunderstood this. Can you have an adult that has protective supervision but is in a day/job day pride program, or go to school/college with a one-to-one assistant? So school, day programs, jobs, those are not things that eliminate you from having protective supervision. Technically, right? If we're looking at face value, there's no regulations that say if you work a job, if you go to school, if you have a day program, you can't get protective supervision, right? However, it does matter with that last part. You said a one-to-one assistant. So we do have we have had several families over the years where they've had protective supervision for their child for many years, and then they become an adult, and now all of a sudden they're transitioning into college, and they'll start attending some college classes. If that child is doing that completely independently, or if they work a job and it's not a day program job of some sort where they're not being supervised like somebody who has protective supervision should be, then yes, you are going to most likely lose your protective supervision and no longer qualify for it anymore. Protective supervision comes down to, is this person being supervised and monitored at all hours of the day and night, right? So I just had a conversation actually with somebody who's going to be working with us, Dakota. It was an intake that I had this week, where the family has had protective supervision for about 4 years. Their adult daughter, who is in her early 20s, she recently, this past year, started working a job at their local grocery store. And it's technically not a work program through regional center or anything like that. It's actually just this local grocery store who markets and offers jobs for people with special needs. So they have a few people on staff that do have special needs. And some are more independent than others, but this person literally works 40 hours a week at this grocery store. And because of that, IHSS decided that this person no longer qualifies for protective supervision. Sorry, Dakota, we got to talk about this one for just a moment on my conversation. I'm remembering now why I wanted to bring this one up to you. So, so when I heard that initially, my mind went to, oh, okay, I mean, probably, right? If they're working 40 hours a week.
Right. Of course you lose your protective supervision like that, right?
Yeah. However, the parents said that this is not, of course, a regular job. And I said, okay, that was a big question that I had. So what does that mean, right? If it's not a work program, if it's not the rehabilitation center. What do you mean by it's not a typical job? Like, are they being supervised? And they said yes. They said yes, she's paid like a normal, salary or normal hourly employee. However, this particular grocery store will allow her to have a professional from regional center, a respite worker, ABA worker, or a parent walk them through their entire shift. So she's like, so the parent said that when she goes, if it's her time to do, to gather the grocery carts from the parking lot, she's doing it with the help of other adults, whether it be, again, her respite worker, her personal assistant for regional center, or mom or dad. So they say they all help out during the week while she's working and supervise her during that period of time. So this is a definitely kind of an interesting situation because it's very rare, right?
Mhm.
So what the social worker said, and I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but this particular social worker told these parents at this assessment, hey, I know you've had PS for several years now. I still think that, Miss Jane Doe here still qualifies for it. However, because she works a job, even though she's supervised, technically my supervisors are telling me that I have to remove protective supervision. However, this is just a formality. Just appeal it and you'll get it sent right back to you.
Oh, that's a very interesting situation.
And then this social worker said, but don't tell anyone that I said that to you because I'd lose my job.
Oh.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So this is kind of just bringing me to a topic that we talk about a lot. And thank you, Elizabeth, for the question. Very good, prompting a lot of good conversation for us. But
If we didn't actually answer your question, the answer is yes, you could still get protective supervision in your situation.
right, yes, if they are still being supervised constantly and still need that constant care. But this brings up a topic that we've talked about, and this kind of goes back to the very beginning. We were talking about the assessment that I did for one of your clients. Is there's a reason that a lot of social workers do not want and do not allow you to record these assessments, because sometimes they will just go off script and will just say some crazy things, whether that's good for you or bad for you, what they say. I was talking to another woman just the other day who, her social worker said, oh yeah, you've got these hours, you'll have them for life, like when they got approved, said, okay, you got these hours, the doctor said that the diagnosis is indefinite, so these hours won't change at all, not at least until your daughter's 18. Told her that 2 years later, oh yeah, I was wrong when I said that, we're actually going to take away all your hours now. And she felt so like blindsided by it and so betrayed, really. And so
Rightfully so.
social workers will just say anything, and whether they're right, whether they're wrong, they'll just say things. And we wish we could record these things, but of course you can't do it without their permission, and so many will not give permission for exactly these reasons. They want to go in there, say whatever they want to say to mostly parents who don't know the regulations, and we'll just let them get away with things because they don't, oh, well, this is an expert. They wouldn't lie to me about how this program works, right?
Yes, and Dakota, we have noticed after many, many years of working with social workers all over the state, some of them tend to just have these memories that just can't recall sometimes what they say. So at an assessment, if you hear a social worker say, oh, little Johnny's 5 years old, he's way too young to qualify for protective supervision. We've heard things like that blatantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like at assessments while we're representing a client, or clients not representing themselves. These are things that many people have been told by their social worker. If you appeal that decision to deny and you end up in front of the judge, and that's a point that's brought up, Your Honor, this was said at the assessment. The social worker said that my child was too young to qualify. Dakota, what tends to happen when the judge questions the social worker about that statement?
I never said that. Here are my notes. In my notes, it doesn't say I said that. It's always that kind of a thing.
It's usually, I don't recall saying something like that, because that would be incorrect. You can't deny somebody because of age. How silly would that be, Your Honor? I would never do that. However, and so do social workers maybe lie a little bit sometimes? I think we can say it can happen, right? It doesn't matter if you're a state employee. people lie. So unfortunately, there have been lots of times where we've been witnesses of that. And what tends to happen when a social worker lies under oath? Dakota?
Absolutely nothing. Not a single thing.
Yeah, not unless you can catch them in the lie, right? If there's actual evidence of the lie, different story, right? But if because you can't record the assessment,
if there's actually evidence to lie, maybe the judge will rule in your favor, maybe not. And even then, there isn't actually any discipline against the social worker. Just, oh, guess the social worker is not telling the truth. Well, then, maybe the claimant's telling the truth. That's the best outcome possible of catching the social lie. Okay, we have one more question to get to.
Okay,
But
go ahead.
one last thing I'll say that social workers sometimes say at assessments that isn't true is they will say you can only get protective supervision if you first get approved in some other category of IHSS.
Yep.
Not true. In case you've ever heard that, or if you're about to hear it at when you apply for IHSS.
If you're in Alameda County, you've heard that.
Yeah. Now this usually only happens for really young children that they'll be told this, but don't believe it if you hear it. All right. I think this is our last question for now from Veronica. My daughter is 10, needs help with grooming, oral hygiene, dressing, etc. She needs help from another person, even with directions at school as well. Her teacher is very concerned as well. She has a learning disability, lupus, and polyarthritis. Will she be able to qualify for PS? Now, Caleb, I don't know what is exactly lupus. Is that a mental impairment?
No, lupus, to my understanding, is a blood disorder.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong, but I think it is. But Teresa, if you're listening, are we right? Are we wrong? Somewhere in between?
Want me to give you lupus?
Yeah, she'll look it up to give us a little bit of context. But the only thing that holds me back from saying yes, you definitely get PS is I don't know if the learning disability.
No, their question wasn't. Oh, it was PS. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Lupus is an autoimmune disease like arthritis, where the body's immune system attacks its tissues and organs.
Okay, autoimmune disease, not related to
organs. Arthritis attacks joints.
Okay, not related to mental impairment. So the only thing that I think holds me back from saying about qualifying for PS is I don't know if the learning disability would raise to the level of mental impairment that you need in order to qualify. Because the main thing is, needing directions at school, maybe shows some disorientation, but there need to be clear evidence of lack of safety awareness that leads to unsafe behaviors.
Correct.
So if it's only about getting lost at school, if that's the only issue, I would say probably not.
And I misunderstood the question initially. Sorry. For some reason, my brain went to, would they qualify for IHSS, not protective supervision, right?
Yeah,
would they qualify for IHSS? Probably, if they have needs for it in those other categories, but specifically protective supervision, the thing that stands out is this: a learning disability may not always be a mental impairment. So in order to qualify for protective supervision, you almost always have to have a mental impairment and or a mental illness, right? So if you have dyslexia, or maybe you have a lower IQ, but you still have comprehension of safety, excuse me, then we're not really talking about somebody who necessarily needs protective supervision, right? So based on this information, Veronica, there's not a whole lot for us to say yes or yes to. We might be able to say no to it, but I think it'd be, if you wanted to connect with us privately, feel free to get on my calendar. You can call our office. I'm happy to chat with you about your daughter and her needs. And if she doesn't need protective supervision, then maybe she does need IHSS still, and we could talk about other categories she might qualify for. All right, Dakota, I got to run. We are out of time, and I know we want to save time for Miss Alicia, and I assume Nicole. Alicia and Nicole are doing it at 1. You said, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your questions, your comments. Dakota, thank you for being my partner every single week. I absolutely love disagreeing with you when I have an opportunity to. I'm just kidding.
It happens so rarely nowadays. It's so sad. But yes, thank you for being here with us. And Nicole and Alicia are going live in just a few minutes here. And thank you all for being here. Share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this information. And we'll be back with you again next week. All right.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next time.
See ya.